walking into this conference, which is held by the organisation United for Wildlife, well, it doesn't exactly scream wildlife. It's being held in central London. Almost everyone around me is in a suit, and the floor-to-ceiling windows are overlooking the city's most iconic skyscraper, the Shard. There's nothing wild about this scene, unless you consider a statement polka dot pocket square wild. But what goes on in this room is meant to be central to protecting the world's most endangered species.
The illegal wildlife trade is driving these iconic animals to extinction.
The proceedings start with a "you wouldn't steal a car" style montage.
It's a violent trade fueled by corruption and extortion. A trade that puts over $20 billion into the hands of international criminal gangs every year.
The video being projected explains how organizations can better spot money laundering, intercept suspicious cargo, and arrest wildlife criminals.
We are United for Wildlife.
Then the panel discussions begin. And there are some seriously big wigs speaking today.
Stephen is the executive director of Interpol.
She's the director of South Africa's Financial Intelligence Unit.
Raja is the president of the Financial Action Task Force.
But the biggest wig, the beehive of conference speakers, is yet to get here. And we've got to be prepped for his arrival.
You do not have to stand to attention or sing the national anthem or salute or anything. He will just come and take his place quietly.
Then he enters, gliding across the conference floor with a head bowed at an angle that says, "I know everyone's looking at me." It's
His Royal Highness
William Wills, the future King of England.
the Prince of Wales.
He takes to the podium.
Thank you, Amanda. Our natural world is one of our greatest assets. It is a lesson I learned from a young age from my father and my grandfather, and also from my much-missed grandmother, who cared so much for the natural world.
In fact, Prince William is the founder and president of United for Wildlife, an organisation funded by the Royal Foundation, which is basically a mix of private donors and royal money.
We've contributed to over 450 law enforcement cases, almost 200 seizures of wildlife products.
And what is the name on his regal lips?
Mwazu Kroma, conspiring to traffic more than $7 million worth of rhino horn and elephant ivory.
We've come here to find out more about the Kroma case, because it's possibly the hottest topic in wildlife law enforcement. The New Yorker recently called it, by some measures, the most successful prosecution of a transnational crime organization. Everyone wants to talk about it.
US authorities led the way in this case, but critical to its success was the collaboration of a broad range of organizations across multiple continents.
It's the case we've become so fascinated by, because of how close we've been able to get to the people involved, and because of how much it reveals about the whole illegal wildlife trade. But then, while we were at this conference, there was something else everyone was talking about. Another name that kept coming up.
Anton Mzimba.
Anton Mzimba.
Sergeant Anton Mzimba.
Ranger Anton Mzimba.
Anton Mzimba's name swirled around the conference room, like some sort of Pentecostal wind, a kind of legend of the conservation world, spoken about with an almost mythic reverence, even sometimes through tears.
Anton was a friend, a mentor, and ultimately a visionary.
And people, even Prince William, were saying it was his heroism that had made this ranger a target.
He stood up to violent criminals and paid the ultimate price.
See, in 2022, Anton was killed, assassinated. His death has thrown a spotlight on the dangers out there on what's called the front lines of conservation, where rangers like Anton are on the ground, protecting wildlife from poachers. So I got really curious. Who was this man? And what led to his death? But there was something else that stuck in my mind. We kept hearing this phrase. Rangers are just buying us time to fix the tangled transnational mess that is the illegal wildlife trade. But what did that even mean? And if rangers are up against violence and murder, how much time do we have for people like Wolf to try to dismantle these criminal organizations anyway? And then there was this other question I started thinking about, because to me it was hard to ignore that these rangers, mostly black African men and women, are going and being sent like some sort of sacrificial lambs to fight on the front lines of this war. A war that by most accounts is impossible to win. So why is this happening? I wanted to get to the bottom of all this and to figure out where the Koroma case, with all its weird, globally interconnected, undercover drama, actually fit into the bigger world of anti-poaching efforts. Anton Mzimba's story seemed like it might hold some of the answers, so I started talking to people at the conference. Then met his family, people who saw firsthand how a bounty was placed on his head. And then we were given a glimpse into what happened to Anton Mzimba. In real time.
I know by now that they have hired 2 men to shoot me.
From the teams at Luminary, Dream Crew, and Novel, on this episode of The Wildlife.
Big concern here is that they may think of abducting one of my kids.
Incorruptible.
The hunt for me is still on.
After Prince William left, we got to the serious work of conference going, getting people's business cards. Specifically, we wanted to find people who could tell us more about Anton Mzimba.
QR code, and then you can add it to you just tap on here. Add the contact.
And someone who slings us their details is a guy with a surprisingly aristocratic name, John Jerko, II.
So yeah, my dad is John Jerko, and they gave me the second instead of Junior.
John is originally from a tiny village in Ohio called Yankee Lake. How John ended up at this conservation conference in London starts back in 2017. That's when John, an aspiring filmmaker, first learned about the rhino poaching epidemic. More than 1,000 rhinos were killed in South Africa that year alone for their horns, pushing the species to the precipice of extinction. On the other side, there were the field rangers, working to stop the poachers.
These rangers were the ones on the front line protecting the rhinos.
Learning about this behind his computer in the US, John was blown away. To him, these rangers seemed like incredible, courageous characters, perfect characters for a documentary he wanted to make.
I guess the adventure of Africa is part of it. I'd never been to Africa.
So, as many Westerners with an adventurous spirit do, John headed to Africa, South Africa to be exact.
Growing up, you see giraffes and rhinos and lions in the zoo, but to see them out in nature, it's a really powerful experience.
He arrived at the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve, and that's when he met his guide for the day, Anton Mzimba himself.
I think he had had a bad night's sleep and slept weird on his neck, and his neck was just in so much pain, but he kind of sucked it up and just took us out there and made sure we got everything we needed.
And it was this persistence in the face of chiropractic suffering that first showed Anton's personality to John and made him the perfect star of his documentary. To many, Anton epitomized honor and dedication. In almost every photo I've seen of him, he has his shoulders back, eyes squinting, looking out on the horizon of the South African landscape.
He was that person who, when I grew up, I said that, no, I want to be like Anton. I want to be the next Anton.
This is Olat Ndlovu, Anton's cousin. And like Anton, Olat was an animal guy, specifically a bird guy.
I happened to get crossed when some other guys, will go out and hunt birds. Those who were younger than me, I will tell them to stop it, but those who were older than me, I will just hate them.
When he was a child, Olat was out there being a bird vigilante. Meanwhile, Anton was becoming a ranger down the road at a reserve called Timbavati. It was a job that made sense to Anton. Interestingly, he'd always seen soldiers as a child in his home country, Mozambique, and idolized them. See, Anton had come to the conclusion that I did in learning about their roles. Rangers and soldiers were really not so different. When Anton began his work, Olat was around 11 and Anton was 17, which is pretty much the sweet spot for worshipping an older, cooler cousin. So, after school, Olat would visit him on the reserve.
I will go and sit with him and try and understand what exactly are they doing out there, every day, because I will see they carrying rifles and going out early in the morning.
Anton would explain that his job was to patrol and protect national parks and the animals inside of them. But for him, it was more than a job. It was something of a higher calling. Here's how he described it in a 2021 interview for Global Conservation Corps, an education nonprofit.
We have to take care of the animals, the fish in the sea, and the birds on the sky, because God pronounced it.
South Africa contains the largest remaining rhino population in the world. Anton would say to Orlat how they were fighting a battle against poachers who were killing rhinos for their horns, selling them for tens of thousands a pop on the black market, and reshaping the natural environment in the process. After all, rhinos play a role in the larger ecosystem. They spread seeds when they eat plants, create water holes for other animals and insects when they roll around in mud. And this mission to protect animals, it resonated with Orlat.
Okay, maybe this is what I want to do. Even way back then, I could get angry when guys are shooting birds and stuff. Then I said that, yes, maybe I'm the right one.
So Orlat followed in Anton's footsteps. And actually, Anton seems to have started a ranger dynasty in his family.
My name is Leita Mkabela. Anton is my cousin. We share a grandfather.
But Leita describes Anton as
my brother.
Leita is part of the Black Mambas, which is an all-female anti-poaching unit in South Africa. For Leita, her work involves going on patrols, collecting data on plants, animals, and water, responding to injured animals or emergencies from people living around the area. It's a job that can be rough, even emotionally, especially if you find the carcass of a dead rhino.
That feels like when you've lost your child.
But if Leita had some kind of problem at work, there was only one person she had on speed dial, Anton.
So it was a benefit to have a brother at home and to have a mentor at work.
Leita and Orlat looked up to Anton. And in their industry, everything about his career had been exemplary. He was just a teenager when he started out on the job in 1998. But Anton climbed the ladder, quickly getting promoted from junior ranger to senior ranger, corporal, sergeant to head of ranger services, impressing leaders in his field.
We would talk about there are two kinds of people on Earth, those that want to work and those that don't want to work.
Like Ruben de Kock.
Those that want to work, come stand by us. Those that don't want to work, stay away.
He's ex-military, not uncommon in this space. And his warmth and facial hair is giving major Santa Claus vibes, if Santa Claus was a chain smoker. These days, he teaches rangers how to ranger, including Anton when he was just starting out. Ruben remembers the very first time they met.
The first moment that I spoke to him, I could just see a focused individual, somebody that was young, energetic, somebody that wanted to be part of the solution.
Ruben was always asking Anton, leave the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve and instead come work full-time for my organization, training rangers. One time, he even said to Anton, look, here's a contract.
Unbeknownst to me, I'd offered him about 2.5 times his salary. However, Anton looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, sir, but Timbavati gave me my first opportunity and I've got to be loyal to them. When it comes to that total commitment, Anton Mzimba is one of a kind.
Over the years, John began to get to know Anton too for his movie, Rhino Man. He would crisscross between rural South Africa and Atlanta, Georgia, filming with Anton and the Rangers, and then trying to raise money for his project.
I became good friends with Anton, so I would WhatsApp him lots of voice messages.
Hope everything goes well with the movie and all those things.
And we keep in touch, checking in.
I wanted to say happy birthday to you. I just got Facebook notification right now as I speak. So happy birthday, John.
Yeah, we became pretty close and really got to know each other on a deeper level.
I'm so privileged to have you as my friend in my life. I've learned a lot from you. God bless you.
We were always reaching back out to each other. Hey, Anton, thank you so much for the message.
Hi, John. Thanks for checking on me.
Hey, Anton.
Hi, John.
Hey, Anton.
Hi, John. Thanks for the update.
But then, things started to change with Anton.
I sent him a message just to check in, see how he was doing. Hey, Anton. Just checking in with you. Hope you're doing well.
He seemed different to John.
Hi, John. Thanks for checking on me.
This was the first time I ever heard Anton not in a really good mood.
I'm still alive. This is a very difficult moment for me.
He sounded really beat down.
And eventually, during the spring of 2022,
he sent me a text basically saying that 2 men had been hired to take him out for, I think he said 15,000 Rand, which is about $1,000 to basically hunt him down and kill him.
They have hired 2 men to shoot me.
And that was just like a short text. And I was like, what the heck is going on?
What was going on? How could a park ranger become an assassination target? For what? Protecting rhinoceroses? It seems so extreme, so seemingly evil. It took me a while to fully understand all the thorny political and historical context that surrounds this story. Even when John arrived in South Africa to make his documentary, he didn't really get it.
At the beginning, it was more surface level. You know, you're like, okay, there's these bad guys that are out there and there's a lot of money for the rhino horn. They're up against these rangers that are trying to protect them. But as you spend more time there, you realize that it's an extremely complex situation.
So John started researching for his documentary to zoom out a bit and see the backdrop this is all happening against. And I wanted to figure this out too. So I went on my own mission.
Watching movies like The Lion King, Tarzan and Jane, all of these movies that we grew up watching that instills this sense of wanting to help and save wildlife.
Which led me to finding Dr. Abby Sen.
But from whom?
She's West African, lived all over, but is a Senegalese national. Now she's an assistant professor at Clemson University in South Carolina in the US. She's one of the most prominent critics of mainstream conservation in academia, and she presents an alternate view of the origins and impact of conservation.
I do know that some of my colleagues who have been very vocal about it have already gotten physical threat against them. Luckily, I'm not there yet, but it can feel very alienating. You often feel misunderstood.
I spoke to Professor Sen because I wanted to dig deeper into what's going on in lots of these national parks across Africa. Anton worked in the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve, which is along the western edge of the Kruger National Park. That's one of Africa's largest game reserves, and its origins date back to the late 1800s.
Most national parks in Africa were established during the colonial era. It was mostly white settlers who came in, wanted to create their own African wilderness.
Create their own because the arrival of European guns and hunting practices were threatening the ecosystem that existed before.
Wilderness is a very Eurocentric, very white-centric colonial ideal of what landscape should be like, which is completely emptied of people.
See, well before Kruger National Park, or any of the other national parks in Africa, were declared sanctuaries, they were home to entire communities. In the case of Kruger National Park, once it was officially established as a protected park in 1926 by the colonial government, thousands of Africans were expelled from its land.
Forcibly removed all indigenous communities to create this fake Garden of Eden, basically, for white settlers.
It wasn't just Kruger. In these years, other parks were set up too. In 1935, a prominent black South African newspaper, Bantu World, summed the situation up this way. While the government is engaged in this gigantic land scheme for the preservation of animal life, thousands of human beings are landless and homeless and are living in a state of abject poverty. One would have thought that before more land is added to the game reserve, the homeless black man who is drifting to urban areas only to find he is unwanted would have been attended to first. The preservation of animals is a noble thing, but nobler still is the preservation of human life, be it white or black.
Not only did they remove them, they also took their rights to hunting. If you remove subsistence hunting, this was a mean for them to become self-sufficient. So you are basically thrusting people into forced labor, right, to be able to survive.
Africans living around protected areas, who had previously relied on hunting to eat, suddenly found themselves up against the law. If you entered the park, which may have once been your home, to capture an animal, you're now a poacher. If a person killed animals for meat, for food, it's classified as subsistence poaching. If the animal is killed to be sold, like the rhino's horn or a buffalo's meat, it's called commercial poaching. But both are deemed illegal. I dug further into these dynamics with an academic called Dr. Mordecai Ogada.
Yeah, he's also another very outspoken person.
And he started telling me about how all this creates a really fraught relationship between the park and the typically not very wealthy locals who live nearby it.
This upsets the natural equilibrium because people now get offended when wildlife comes close to their villages because they say, we are not allowed to go to the wildlife place, but wildlife are allowed to come to our place.
Like when elephants destroy crops, for example. So, in reaction to all this, I started to understand this idea that poaching could represent some type of reclamation of land and resources, almost in the spirit of decolonization.
It's a political retaliation, right? It is a subversive act to basically flip the middle finger at these institutions that have taken the land away from them, but also even the sense that the value more wildlife than they value their own lives.
We've been mostly talking about national parks here, parks run by governments. But where Anton Mzimba worked was a private nature reserve on the edge of a national park, called Timbavati, owned by the De Villiers family. Their ancestors first bought a farm in the area around 90 years ago. They then bought more and more and more land in tandem with becoming celebrated conservationists. The area eventually became a private nature reserve thanks to support from the government. On the reserve today are private safaris and lodges costing as much as $950 a night. And, tourism is pointed out as an important reason for protecting wildlife. Because wildlife helps people make money. Commercial lodges in Timbavati employ around 250 people from the local communities, many in service jobs. But who reaps the real profits from tourism across South Africa?
The person would, most likely he'd be white, or he or she. Or if not, it would be a local person, but working for the white person would be a boss somewhere.
The majority of tour operators in Africa around protected areas are owned by foreigners. They're not owned by local people. Even if they're owned by nationals, they're mostly from the elite class.
Some of these parks and reserves, like Timbavati, have foundations. The purpose is to support local communities and conservation efforts. But complicating things further, a key source of cash for Timbavati and others has been hunting. This is where people, again typically white tourists, can pay Timbavati to shoot elephants, hippos, zebras, or giraffes. In the past, Timbavati even allowed rhino hunting, which is actually still possible in several other private reserves across South Africa. There are defenders of this practice. They argue that creating narrow, controlled rules around legal trophy hunting and charging big bucks, thousands of dollars for the experience, helps places like Timbavati to support these conservation efforts. We reached out to Timbavati several times to ask them about, among other things, trophy hunting on their land, but we haven't heard back. Back in 2013, though, former chairman of Timbavati, Tom Hancock, wrote in an open letter, quote, "The Timbavati has one of the most effective anti-poaching units in the world. This comes at huge cost and needs to be paid for somehow. But it's impossible to ignore the racial dynamics at play in the world of conservation, even in the language used."
The narrative you find when Black people feature, it's in a negative context. They're poachers as opposed to hunters. They're herders as opposed to ranchers. Ranchers are good white people with livestock. Herders are bad Black people with livestock.
To me, poaching is the criminalization of poverty, period.
Then some people point out another double standard. See, like poaching, conservation is a big business. Apparently, the global market for environmental, conservation, and wildlife organizations is worth more than $20 billion. You can even make money training rangers or selling them equipment. So, skeptics say, is the protection of animals the main driving force of conservation work? Or is it profit? Knowing this, it helps explain why rangers aren't always exactly celebrated by their neighbors.
Park rangers start to become stigmatized within their own communities, right? There's a lot of retaliation from the local communities against park rangers.
I finally felt like I was starting to understand why people might have wanted to turn to poaching. Whether it was simply greed, or maybe it was motivated by poverty or politics. And why poaching syndicates might have wanted to hurt someone like Anton. Someone who was so committed to being a ranger. A job that sometimes pit him directly against his community. Even before his passing, Anton talked about this tension.
So we are perceived as bad people. We are also attacked by the community members because they think what we are doing is wrong. It's totally wrong. And they want to fight back. You feel like you are living in an island, in an isolation.
This pressure between the rangers and poachers has been escalating. Because now, with more and more people buying rhino horn as a medicine, there's more money available and more weapons. The conflict has crescendoed to a point that Anton's cousin Orlat says,
Of recent, it's more like they're declaring war. They know that there are rangers out there trying to protect those rhinos, but they're still coming in with those big rifles and also the pistols and AK-47 to fight. This is war.
That's one word that really stuck with me. War. This has all the hallmarks of it. Both sides are heavily armed. Rangers, too, are being given military-grade weapons. In Kruger, for example, they're allowed to open fire if threatened with lethal force. And like in all wars, it's the foot soldiers sent to the front lines who suffer the most. Rangers are killed, but poachers are too. And as I learned more, it started to seem to me that their deaths were often disregarded. In 2015,
the president of Mozambique had accused Kruger National Park of killing close to 500 Mozambican men
over the course of only 5 years. And Abby tells me there's no data around the deaths of poachers.
But the one thing that you will find for sure is the number of elephants, the number of rhinos, the number of wildlife that have been killed. That data is always available.
So it's a bloody battle for poachers and for rangers. But despite the high risk for the rangers, for those on the front line like Anton and Orlad, it's not always high financial reward. On average, a ranger earns around $600 per month, which is about half the median South African income.
You can see that the drive, it's not about money. It's about the love of what I'm doing.
So imagine, you're earning that little money for such a dangerous job, and the people who live around you resent what you're doing, resent rangers. Maybe you didn't have a deeply held childhood love of birds like Orlat did. And maybe you're not 100% on board with conservation for all the reasons I listed above anyway. And then, one day, a poaching syndicate comes and offers you a huge amount of money to help them. Many rangers say yes, and, like in war, they become double agents, working against their own side. Orlat knows all about syndicates trying to bribe rangers, because it's happened to him too.
I've been approached by this guy. He said it like, it's a small thing that we want you to do. It's just a phone call and you're done. Once we in and out, then you've got so much money that we're going to share with you.
Just a phone call? How bad could it be?
You're not doing anything. It's not like you're going to go and shoot the rhinos, but you just direct us as to where to find those rhinos. Where are your guys? And what time do they knock off? What time should we operate?
The poachers who approached Orlat for this information offered him
like 150,000 rand.
That's $8,000, a year's salary. But Orlat wasn't tempted. He decided to basically lie to the guy.
Then I said like, oh, sorry. No, I'm no longer working there. So yeah, I got dismissed. Yeah, that's how I got him off my back.
These are the kind of offers Anton Mzimba probably faced before his death too.
Without question, Anton would have been approached and told, listen, you can make a lot of money telling us this. You can make a lot of money staying away from that area. You can do this, that, or the other.
Anton apparently didn't accept these bribes. Perhaps he didn't share the same political views about conservation that others in his community did, or the financial pressures that many rangers struggle with. And because money didn't work...
I'm sure Mzimba was approached by somebody after they offered him money that he would not submit to. I'm sure he was approached by somebody that said, this is our last offer. If you don't take us, there's going to be repercussions.
And repercussions there were.
Anton gave me a call, asked me if he could come and see me, and I knew something had gone really badly wrong. He arrived in my office, the first time to ever see Mzimba that angry. And he looked at me and he said, they broke my house last night. The special unit came, kicked down the doors, broke down the windows, and literally searched my entire house for rhino horn. And I looked at him, I said, who could have been stupid enough to think that you were involved in rhino poaching? And he said, no, it's the syndicates.
Apparently, poachers were trying to smear Anton's name by spreading rumors that he was colluding with them, possibly to sow seeds of mistrust or even have him fired. Of course, the police didn't find rhino horn in his house or any evidence he worked with the syndicates.
This man has dedicated so far this greater part of his life to this situation, and then you go and believe bull dust like this.
Despite this intimidation, Anton didn't back down, and the threats kept intensifying. He updated John with voice notes.
So apparently the criminals have been visiting my house and they found no one there. I'm still okay. I'm still kicking and going. The hunt for me is still on.
I think he was moving the family back and forth, trying to evade these guys.
The stress level is still high, especially when I think of these criminals thinking of abducting or kidnapping one of my kids or my family members.
Some of the messages got a little more intense, or you just sense the inner struggle Anton was going through.
I feel heavy on my shoulders. My loyalty, my dedication towards conservation and all those things.
He was sending a lot of these probably late at night before he was going to bed or early in the morning, sitting there at night thinking about this. I think he felt lonely at times.
This is where sometimes you feel like you have no one to support you during this time of testing times and all those things.
I sent Ruben a message and I was like, hey, Ruben, do you know that this is going on? I've just been chatting with Anton. It sounds like he's got a couple of paid hitmen from one of the local crime syndicates trying to take him out.
John gave me a call and he said to me, are you aware of these threats? I think you should give Anton a call. And I gave him a call and I said, hey, what's going on? And he said to me, well, it seems these guys are getting serious now.
Ruben told Anton, come live at my house. Escape these syndicates that are hunting you.
Bring the wife, bring the kids. And Anton said to me, I'm sorry, I can't. I've got to stay close to my guys. If something happens, I want to be able to react. And again, just the man that was completely loyal. A guy that completely ended up literally giving his life for what he was doing.
Towards the middle of 2022, after months of living in fear, Anton started to see a change. He'd made a complaint to the police and the threats were easing off.
For now, everything seems to be quiet.
After a while, Anton started to feel like himself again, was starting to think about, living a normal routine again.
I'm recovering and I'm gaining much more confidence again.
I think the last I heard from him was somewhere in the middle of July.
I wish you were there, man. We will just party together here. But anyway, looking forward to see you soon. Thanks, John.
The information I got was that a vehicle had arrived, apparently a white sedan type vehicle. 3 men came out. They had baseball caps on and said that they had trouble with the vehicle, but they were looking for some water. When Anton saw them, he realized something was off. His service weapon was inside the vehicle, and he made for the vehicle, but they had shot him before that. They shot Anton, I think, 3 times, 3 killing shots, and they shot his wife, and they wounded her in the abdomen. They did this in front of the small baby, the youngest girl.
On the 26th of July, 2022, Orlat and Later got the news that their cousin, Anton, had been killed at his home.
So I just received a phone call from one of them back home, and this lady, she was crying so loud I couldn't hear what she wanted to say. Then I tried to calm her down. The only words that came out, Anton was shot and is dead. You know, and I felt like I was dreaming. I felt like I didn't hear that.
It felt like it was not true, and it felt like it was a dream. Someone would wake you up and say, "No, he's alive."
John was back in the States when the information reached him.
It was first thing in the morning, I was just lifting some weights in the house. And then my roommate, Josh, he came into my room and just had this terrible look on his face. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, Anton's dead.
I lost it. Yeah, I've got to be honest. And I was just moving everywhere, not knowing where I'm going, because, I started crying, but I never wanted to cry in front of everyone. I could even struggle to breathe.
The bad thing about it is that his life was taken in front of his kids, in his own house. We feel safe at home, and we feel protected at home. And then someone comes and make you feel uncomfortable at your own home.
I went outside and I was just going to go for like a hard run or something because I didn't know what else to do. I felt like I just needed to like move or do something. And I ran about a mile, and then I stopped at this bridge that just overlooks a highway. I tried calling Ruben and he didn't answer, so I left him a voice message.
It's pretty devastating. It's the thing that you always fear, and yeah, it's just such an amazing human being.
Anton, after 27 years of friendship, that really rocked my world. It makes me so fucking angry.
Right now, when I'm recording this, it's been more than a year since Anton was killed. He was 42 years old. No one has been arrested for his murder. We can't say for sure who did this or why, but all the people I spoke to seem to think that Anton was killed by poaching syndicates to send a message.
Anton was such a strong figure in that realm. And like I said, he's just one of these incorruptible figures. I think it was seen that if they could take him out, that maybe it would make other Rangers think twice.
Again, like in many wars, this seems almost like a political assassination. Despite this danger, Orlat continues his work as a ranger. But remember what Orlat said?
I always looked at the late Anton Mzimba and said that I want to be like him.
Well, being the next Anton comes with some heavy baggage.
I am, I'm next on their list. It's just that they found him first, but whoever they found between the two of us, they were going to take us out. Whoever is in front of me, I don't trust him. Whoever is behind me, whoever is on the side, left, right, I don't trust him. I can't go to see my family. They might harm them. I'm not free. And that's not life.
One day, Orlat was even approached directly, in person, and given a message.
What happened to him is going to happen to you. It's just a matter of time.
And these guys who came to him and threatened him, well, Orlat recognized them.
Most of them are ex-rangers. Most of the threats came from the ex-rangers, those who were working there and got dismissed, and those are the ones, those who were threatening our lives.
It's his former peers, his neighbors saying he's going to be murdered. And now I'm thinking back to those words we kept hearing, all the way back at that fancy conference in London, that these rangers are just buying us time. Time in a seemingly never-ending war. But this war isn't a Brothers Grimm fairy tale, a battle of good versus evil. See, everyone has their own take. Rangers are heroes. Rangers are traitors. Poachers are murderous criminals. Poachers are revolutionaries. Really, to me, they're just small players in a much larger drama about land rights, colonialism, and power, and these elements end up combusting violently for not only the rhinos, but the people too.
There is nothing wrong that I did to anyone, but the hatred that people had for the job that we're doing, that's the reason why the late Anton Mzimba was taken out of the system. That's the reason why I'm the next on their list. But how do we deal with such? You go to report such intimidations, then they tell you that, okay, yeah, but we've got no proof on that. Then they throw your case out by the door. The next thing, you're dead. Yeah, it's so depressing.
This is what Orlat's up against day to day. So how do you deal with this issue? I think a huge part of it goes beyond the local police, goes beyond South Africa, and even goes beyond the African continent itself. With the people who are arguably the most responsible for the animals being poached. So, in the next episode, I want to explore what's going on at the other end of the chain. Because otherwise, I'm only telling you a portion of the story. What's obvious is that the people who buy these animal products, the ones pumping money into these syndicates, are perhaps where the buck stops. Next time on The Wildlife.
So I did tell them that this is illegal. And then the owner said, well, because it's illegal, that's why it's expensive.
The buyers.
I just got this gecko at a car with my friend, so she could have also given me an illegal animal like that.
Really freaked out. Basically, this feels like the hotel equivalent of snakes on a plane.
The Wildlife is a Luminary original in partnership with Dream Crew, produced by Novel. It's written and hosted by me, Runako Celina. The series is reported, written, and produced by Saskia Collette, with additional production by Julian Manigera-Patton and Jaco Tajevich. The executive producers are Maithili Rao and Max O'Brien for Novel, Coral Lee for Luminary, Drake, Adele, Future, Noor, Peter Nelson and Maggie Gilbride for Dream Crew, and Mauricio Gris and Alex Farquharson for Thread Studios. Research by Madeline Parr. Sound design mixing and scoring by David Smith. And original music composed by Jake Long. Music supervision by Nicholas Alexander. Production management by Cherie Houston and Charlotte Wolfe. Fact-checking by Dania Suleiman. Jamie Lines is Head of Creator and Content Operations for Luminary. Special thanks to Matt Lindenberg from Global Conservation Corps and John Jerko II.